You've also written historical fiction with your Henry Smart trilogy of novels. Now, the third book, The Dead Republic, it has director John Ford making his movie, The Quiet Man, in Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, when you first saw The Quiet Man, what was your initial reaction?
Oh, I thought it was great. I mean, I was a child when I saw The Quiet Man the first time, and I've seen it so many times that I don't need to see it anymore, a bit like a piece of music. I know it off by heart, really, as do a lot of Irish people, because it's a regular. And I've only seen it on a big screen in a cinema once, and the overpowering sense you get when Maureen O'Hara walks on stage, I mean, she's, or at least walks on screen, the most beautiful woman ever, you know, to appear on screen, suddenly, because it's a big screen. But it's riotously funny, it's hilariously funny, and it's there's a lot of stage paddyism, but it plays on the stage paddyism, and if you sit back and relax and enjoy, wallow in the stage paddyism, its depiction of Ireland is just hilarious, really, you know. The notion that we all sit around drinking and doing nothing, that's only happens in times of recession. Like, we'd much rather be working, you know. Avoiding work isn't what we do, but it's great fun. But I wanted, I suppose, the three books, the Henry Smart books, A Star Called Henry, Oh Play That Thing, and The Dead Republic, as much as anything else, they're about Irish identity, what it is to be Irish. Because Henry is there at the beginning, you know, in 1916, the War of Independence. And this was all about, it was as much about who controls the definition of what it is to be Irish as it was to break away from Britain, you know. Because having broken away from Britain, at one point then, to be Irish was, the definition of Irishness was not British. And obviously then who was going to fill the hole of that not thing, you know. So that's been a battle in Ireland ever since, a cultural battle ever since, you know, as to what it is to be Irish. At the moment, the drive is for, you know, tourism, you know, to redefine ourselves in some sort of a, not unlike the Quiet Man picture, to entice people to come to Ireland, because it's one of the few growth industries after, you know, well, it's not in reality one of the few growth industries, but it's seen as some sort of a rescue from the deep pit we're in at the moment. So there's all sorts of initiatives to try and entice people to the country. And why do people come to Ireland? It's because of the green grass, it's because of the red-headed girls, it's because of, you know, people sitting around chatting in pubs. It's The Quiet Man, yet again. So it's a brilliant film, and it's beautifully filmed, you know, beautifully shot. And John Ford is such a fascinating, monstrous character, you know. And again, Irish in that Irish-American way, but the mythology around him is so strong. I mean, it would appear that he was, when the treaty that caused, you know, that broke Ireland from Britain, but also caused a rift, which caused a civil war, caused the political divisions in Ireland, which are still there. You could say caused the troubles in Northern Ireland, all the, you know, the well-known stories about Ireland. When that treaty was being brought back on the ferry from, you know, Holyhead in Wales to Dublin, with Michael Collins, you know, kind of a well-known Irish figure, John Ford was on the ferry.
Really?
Yeah.
See,
you know, he would have said he was regardless, but it would appear there's enough historical evidence to make his claim true, that he just happened to be on the ferry.
See, I saw this when I'm reading The Dead Republic. I sort of, you know, saw this battle, you know, between Henry and John. You know, this battle between America and Ireland in a way, and mythologizing. Yeah. And I was wondering if you were being at all revisionist with that. And
well, you know, I'm writing fiction, and I revise all the time. Yeah. So I mean, again, this notion of revisionism, the Republican, you know, the Sinn Féin Republican view of the story is very linear. And at one point, any historian or any politician or any casual speaker who suggested that things might have been a little bit more complicated, that, for example, a lot of the soldiers that they were fighting happened to be Irish, you know, or that sometimes an act of rebellion, the assassination of somebody, was just a pure act of bigotry because the guy happened to be a Protestant, you know. If, you know, either on a micro or a macro scale, if something that swerved away from the straight line of Republican virtue was suggested, the word revisionism or revisionist was used as a hammer, you know. So I don't have any difficulty with it. I think it's up for grabs who owns ownership, who owns the definition of the country, you know. And if you're living in a country that has a very solid image of itself and sells that image abroad, And the reality is that actually 10 people, 1 in every 10 living in Ireland weren't born in Ireland. And that there are kids now with Polish names and, African names and, Irish names sitting in classrooms together, and all of them feel a sense of being Irish. Who's going to include that in the definition of Irishness? So the stories are, I hope they're entertaining, but behind it all there's this notion of who, because The Quiet Man had a colossal influence on what people perceived Ireland to be, which was very entertaining. But when the Irish then tried to play along with that definition, which is imposed by an American, it's probably not healthy, if that makes sense.
With The Quiet Man, how much has Ireland moved away from that notion in recent years?
Very much so. I mean, Ireland is a very modern society. It's an urban society now, really. Far more people live in cities and towns than live in the countryside. And the laws, around, say, homosexuality and things like that, very liberal in a way. And acceptance of people and people's individual decisions, where the Catholic Church isn't the huge force it used to be. So it's very open. Very open society, and a lot of stones have been lifted, and a lot of ugliness has been accepted, and so in many ways, from my point of view as a writer, it's a great place to live. I can't imagine living anywhere. Well, I can imagine living. I can't imagine wanting particularly to live anywhere else, because I can say what I want, and really, there aren't all that many places where you can get away with that. But I can say what I want, and we're at a point in the country now where nobody gives a toss what I say, or other writers say. It's kind of almost impossible to shock, and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, I live on the north side of Dublin, which sometimes has this notoriety, being rough or whatever. But actually, it's incredibly green. It is really incredibly green. If you see it from a height, it's really unusual for a city to have so much green, a lot of parks, a lot of trees. And the notion that Ireland is a green place is actually very, very true, despite a lot of the ugliness of some of the modern building and these ghost estates, housing estates that were never occupied because they were never finished, and they're little horrible blots on the landscape. But nevertheless, the place is really quite beautiful. And there is a level, and I notice its absence when I'm somewhere else, that there is a level of conversation and chat and fun that even in the dark times, perhaps more so in the dark times, occurs. It's not unusual for perfect strangers in a queue to talk to one another, and to chat away while they're waiting for something, whereas it doesn't happen in other places. People talking on the bus or on the tram or on the train, people who've never met before. You go to London and people are just, it's the rule, you don't talk.
It's a little stiffer.
Yeah, I suppose having the Blackberries and things like that gives you a license then to just look down at your lap all the time. You don't have to make eye contact with anybody. But it doesn't really happen in the same way in Ireland. I don't want to exaggerate it. It's not that everybody's dying to talk to everybody else, and that if you walk into a pub, you're welcomed like a native and everybody takes you
So they're
home.
not going to cheer when I go?
No, they won't give a toss whether you come or go. But there is a level, if you like, of sociability, I think, that's there. And it's brought to an extreme in The Quiet Man, I suppose. But it's there. And I know I'm not exaggerating it, because I kind of know it's not there in other places I've been to. And it's immediately there when I get home. And maybe, obviously it is home. And home has an emotional clout. But it's definitely, so there's a level of, despite the change from rural to urban, despite the loss of a lot of what would have made The Quiet Man, that there is a certain diluted truth in it at the same time. That you're never far from a laugh, really. Things are satirized immediately. Jokes become stories, things that actually happen, no matter how absurd the punchline is. So, and we play with the language a lot. We break the rules, we invent words. Now, I know it happens everywhere, but it happens really quickly in Ireland,